Is the goal of an RPG roleplay inhabiting a character, or is roleplay an sort of desirable but incidental side effect of the actual core purpose of the game? And if we get this wrong, are we diminishing what the real true core purpose of the game is, and are we maligning the people who play it that way? That's the thrust of a comment I got on my last video from a guy called the Dice Mechanic, and it was thought-provoking enough that I thought I would make a video about it and respond to it here. Hi, I'm Matt. Welcome to the Tomb of Lime. You're defining success personally as successfully inhabiting the role of a character. Now, I have no argument against that being a good and fun thing to do in a game. It brings a sense of satisfaction and meaning to play that a lot of players are desperately unfortunate to never experience. On the other hand, if that is your object, then you don't need a game. The game does not intrinsically establish this, and while it can be a more or less successful vehicle for your objective is not the game, and the game is not to achieve your objective. If inhabiting the role of a character is your objective, you do not need a game. Yes, correct. I think I said this in the last video, actually, that roleplay precedes the role-playing game. So yeah, there's plenty of roleplay you can do without a game. You can sit around in your own house and pretend you are someone else if you like. But there is a game to be had here. I think that comes when this second part. The game does not intrinsically establish this, and while it can be a more or less successful vehicle for your objective is not the game, and your game is not to achieve your objective. Okay, so I don't think this is correct. I think no objective is intrinsic to games as such. Okay, games have different objectives, and you need to sort of decide on your objective, and then you build the rules of the game to support that. You don't need a game to roleplay, but if you want to roleplay with other people, and if you want to roleplay in an imaginative world, then if you don't have rules, it is a very high chance that you'll have a situation where there will become contradictions and incongruencies. If two players attempt an action with mutually exclusive outcomes and they both succeed, let's say, then it breaks the immersion in the game world. It breaks your ability to roleplay. It breaks your ability to inhabit the character. So we have rules and, the GM and that structure around that, and these prevent this kind of clash from occurring. And if you've got the rules that facilitate that, then you can have a game session where you never ever get in the situation where a contradiction occurs, and it's never necessary to break character. With the right rule set and the right GM, of course, you can have a seamless session of roleplay where in-character play happens the entire time. I think it's a very elegant system. Your goal is roleplay, and you've got rules that directly facilitate and support that. The character you're inhabiting likely does not seek failure or stagnation. Exceptions, of course. Your acceptance of it or pursuit of it is at least potentially a break from your own goal of inhabiting that mind. This character would never / always can be as untrue to the process of playing that role as I am going to choose this mathematically best option over the more thematically appropriate one. These two choices can be very much two sides of the same coin. See, this is brilliant. This is a wonderful conundrum, a nice piece of rhetoric. So let me put this in slightly more formal terms here. Your character does not seek failure. That's saying to inhabit your character, roleplay your character, you have to work towards your character's goals. Premise A. Premise B would then be sometimes acting in character can actually work against those goals. And premise C would be sometimes metagaming, I suppose this out-of-character stuff, the mathematically best option can work towards your character's goals. So therefore, metagaming is just as legitimate a way to roleplay as acting in character. I love it. It's very nice. I wish I had come up with something like this myself. What might you say about this one in particular? Well, the problem I have is with premise A, that inhabiting a character, that role-playing means seeking that character's goals. I think that seeking a character's goals is a very big and important part of roleplay, but it is not equal to roleplay. It is not roleplay itself. It's a subordinate goal. Consider this. Consider we have a goal that is to clean the car. And then we have this subordinate goal, which is wipe the mud off. Okay? Now, you could grab an oily rag, and then you could succeed on the subordinate goal of wiping the mud off of the car. But if you do that, you've succeeded on the subordinate goal, but you haven't also succeeded on the superordinate goal of cleaning the car because you've just rubbed oil all over your car. If your subordinate goal doesn't also achieve your superordinate goal, it's an invalid way to do it. Since roleplay is our superordinate goal, metagaming, since that is coming out of character, I would say that that doesn't achieve our superordinate goal of being in character. I know of a player, not one of mine, who has an ingenious way of achieving his character's goals, and that is he finds out what module the GM is running, and then he reads through it beforehand. He knows where all the traps and treasure are. He knows what enemies he's going to face. It's a peak game mastery. Sun Tzu would be proud. When thinking about a lot of things, this is a great little exercise that you can do, is look at your goals and decide which ones are superordinate or subordinate to each other and see how they affect each other. And I would say that whatever you put as your main top superordinate goal, that should, I guess, be what your game is most about. And if you decide that you want to put a goal above that, more superordinate than that, then maybe the game is actually about that instead. To abstract this a bit, let's imagine a football player who shakes hands before and after the game, compliments his teammates and opponents and picks them off the ground after a rough play, enjoys the scent of grass on the field and wind on his skin, and to shorten the descriptors, plays mindful of every sensation of that game, every time the clock starts to the moment it finishes and hours beyond. Is he someone you want to play with? Someone you want to emulate? Someone you can learn from? Absolutely, yes. Is he successfully playing the game in a way that brings him joy? Yes. Is he successfully playing the game? More information required. Does he get football? Depends on who you ask. Would he enjoy running around a neatly mown grass field with his friends kicking a ball just as much? No idea. We can say this player is enjoying the game from many factors associated with the game, but not dependent on it. He will enjoy playing, win or lose, although we don't know if there's a disparity yet. If we ask him to define what football is, he may use tones and themes very similar to the way you describe a role-playing game. He may also disdain the idea of results on a scoreboard as being incidental to play. Okay, this one I don't think this is as good. Basically, when you start from the idea that you have privileged information about what the game of football is about and then work your way back there, that's called circular reasoning or begging the question. By way of example, let me commit the exact same fallacy that you have, except I'll use my position as the privileged information. Let's say there's a man. His name is John Football, the inventor of the game of football, and we are reading his first original manuscript of Football First Edition, and the rules go like this. The pitch will be divided into a grid of 5 foot by 5 foot squares. Each player will start in a different square. Each player will take turns moving. They can move up to 6 squares on their turn. If they end their turn in a square where the ball is, they can kick the ball. If the ball passes through a square adjacent to yours, you can jump into that square to intercept it as an immediate reaction. I think you can see where I'm going with this. If you start with the idea that you've got the privileged information, of course you can work back to the answer that you've gotten it right. A better way to have done this is, let's pick football and then say, okay, how would we actually decide what football was? You start with a neutral position and then use your method to get to the answer. I'd say that what I've done is taken football, let's say, and then I look at all the different variants of football and I try to discover what about each one of, what about them is similar across them all to try and get to the core of what football really is. When I say football, I'm talking about what a lot of people call soccer. I don't know where you're from, sorry. But I'd look at American football and rugby and Aussie rules. And I think, I'd look at football variants like, there's a variant game called Possession that, you can use for training where there are no goalposts. The teams just vie for control over the ball to try and keep it in their possession for as long as possible. If kids say, let's go play football in the playground, and they draw goalposts in chalk on a wall and they take turns taking shots at that goal, and none of them are keeping score, but or sometimes there's a goalie and sometimes there's not, they're playing football, but it's very different to those other forms of football. We could take this even further, I think. What if you're at a picnic and somebody says, hey, let's play football, and they grab their ball out and they start running around and kicking it around, and kids are chasing after them and they're passing the ball to each other, and the goal seems more like to just move your body and teach the kids ball control and so on. They're playing football. If I keep going like this, I might end up deciding that the core activity of football has something to do with a foot and a ball. Or the alternative is we might come to realize that some of these variants of football are just misnamed and that there's a better descriptor. Soccer players that I know will sometimes jokingly disparage games like rugby by calling it hand egg because and I think they probably have the better claim to be calling their sport football than the rugby players do. So yeah, I didn't start from the position of thinking that roleplay was the goal of the game. Okay, this is something that I've arrived at by looking at it and reasoning it out. So you can't really start from the other position and just use that as your baseline. Start from somewhere neutral and then work to it through reason. And if you think my reasoning is incorrect, then well, let's talk about it. Let's work it out. Let's work out why. Anyway, moving on. So I would say to him, this footballer, the same thing I say to you. I completely believe you unquestionably love this. I can clearly see that you understand parts of this many people do not, and I wish you every microsecond of enjoyment that you can wring out of this activity, because I am certain you're bringing that to others at least some of the time, likely a majority. You obviously have something to show others that they definitely need to see. I desperately want you to show more people how to love this game as you do, but for the love of God, please don't try to rewrite the rulebook. Don't redefine this. Don't tell me that your love is better because you enjoy one aspect more than another, and don't try to tell me that the things that have coexisted since the game started need to be ripped apart and redefined so you can justify something that needs no justification by calling it right and true and pure, and the thing that got you started as a hybrid or less or even okay with me. Well, less what? I don't think that games that are more war game than role-playing game are less good. I think that what I was saying is they're less role-playing. And is role-play good? Well, roleplay is good if your goal is to roleplay. But I can tell you now, I don't have any qualms about rewriting the rulebook. Like, we have... How many editions of D&D are we up to now? And that's just one game. The rulebook has been rewritten countless times. To say that we shouldn't be able to question these things just because they're old, that's dogmatism, right? We came to the conclusions that I did through a process of reason. To tell me that... if I come to a conclusion through reason, I should ignore the conclusion because it goes against that dogma, that's anti-intellectual. But you know what the worst thing is? If tabletop role-playing games are necessarily these meta-competitive war games, then people who don't care about being meta-competitive and who don't care about war games and don't care about rule mastery, then those people are excluded from the hobby. This position ends up being dogmatic, anti-intellectual, and exclusionary. Okay. I don't really think that that's the agenda here, okay? Look what the internet has made me. I've only been here for a month. I'm sorry, okay? I think it's more like you're taking the game part of role-playing game and you want to take that as far as it logically goes and make it as excellent as you can. Go for it. I don't think that... us placing our goal as superordinate to the one you have undermines what you're doing at all. The games you're playing, the goals they have, the players you play with, none of that changes. What I'm worried about, and the reason that we are sort of trying to explore what role-playing games are and the language that we use to describe them, is because there are people out there who would be naive to the hobby but maybe interested to see what it's about, but aren't interested in meta-competitive war games at all. But because that is what RPGs mean to so many people, it means that they'll join a session with their friends and expecting to inhabit a character in a fantasy world with their friends, and end up, pushing tokens down a hallway in a sewer for 2 hours. And then at the end of it, they'll say, thanks guys, but this is not for me. And then they'll leave the hobby forever. By looking at the definitions of words, we can avoid confusion and we can create better expectations, and we can allow the hobby to appeal to a broader range of people. And, to some degree, I think people are kind of picking up on this already because, in my last video, we explored an article by Rule of Thule. He's actually making an RPG and he builds it as a wargame-infused role-playing game. That's great. That's a more specific and more accurate description of what he's doing. I think it's also an implicit admission that war games are not intrinsic to RPGs, otherwise he wouldn't have needed to mention it. Matt Colville, right? Matt Colville's immensely successful Kickstarter game, he billed that as tactical, heroic cinematic fantasy, right? Again, this is like an implicit admission that tactical gaming is not intrinsic to role-playing games. And good. Just because it's a more accurate description. It sets up better expectations. It better describes the game that they're playing. By making roleplay, by taking that term and making it better defined, it actually means it can be used in more ways. Because one, it can be used separate from wargames by itself. That's kind of what we are trying to do. But also it means it can now be hybridized with things that are incompatible with wargames for even more possibilities, meaning we've expanded it to more styles of play. The title of that video from before was that I had was The One True Way to Roleplay, but that was a tongue-in-cheek title because what we're doing is by freeing it from its old associations, we're actually expanding its potential. It's the position that RPGs are necessarily wargames that limit its use. I can't speak for everyone, but ultimately I do not care if what we're doing technically doesn't count as a game or not. If we end up having to call it role-playing frameworks instead of role-playing games, so be it. But role-playing games are a hobby in which I think what we're doing belongs. And so we're using that term to try and carve out a very tiny niche in an otherwise monolithic industry of wargame hybrids. So I'll put this out there again. If meta-competitive games, war games, don't appeal to you, or if you just like war games specifically for that purpose, or you don't, care for game mastery and the math and the mechanics, but you just want to inhabit a character with your friends in a shared imaginary world, then I say that you are welcome in the role-playing game hobby, that you're not doing it wrong, and you're in the right place. So thank you again for the Dice Mechanic for their comment. It really helped me crystallize and articulate a lot of my thoughts on this. And, now that I've put some of the stuff about like goals and subordinate goals in place, it's because it's going to really help me write the parts of my role-playing game that define what the game is and what it's about and how to play it. So thank you. I know that you probably wanted to say a lot more, and I encourage you to do so. I don't mind reading long essays in the comment section. I just can't promise that I'll be able to give it all the same attention that I have here. Thanks again, and thanks again everyone for listening. My name's Matt. This has been The Tomb of Lime. Ooh, hello. Here, I've made a secret ending. If you're hearing this, you've discovered it. Thing is, as I was thinking about all this, I actually came up with a counter-argument to my own position. I have some thoughts on it, but I thought, because, I'm not precious about the terms and about being right and so on, I thought maybe I'd share my own counter-argument to my position. The position that role-play is the goal, and that the rules support that goal makes it a game. Here's my counter-argument. So if having a goal of roleplay and rules that support it is enough for it to be a game, then when musicians get together to make music, they have rules like we're going to play in this tempo and in this time signature and in this key and, what instruments each player is going to have and so on. Does that mean that making music constitutes a game? If it doesn't, then what argument would you use to say that? That doesn't exclude role-playing from being a game. I will leave that with the community to answer rather than do it myself. Anyway, thanks again. See you later.